Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff, Mosher, Adam Caplan, and we are finally here. We are at the time. It's called legal tampering period, Adam, and the time is now. So we got a lot to talk about with the Eagles. And even before we get into free agency, obviously there's coaching moves. Obviously there's some non-player free agent news that sprung up this week with a pretty significant player on the team. So we've got a ton to talk about. Of course, we've had a player also re-sign since our last podcast. Always a good thing too. And don't you find that this has been, for us, for what we do, I don't want to call it the most challenging offseason in a while, but different, because I feel like I was going through some of our past pods that we've done leading up to the tampering period. And, like last year, we had names that we felt Hassan Reddick was going to be on there. Marcus Williams, like we knew, go back to when they were going after Byron Jones and Javon Hargrave. We were on that. This year is so different because all we're talking about is guys that the Eagles might lose and only can hope to retain if the price is right. It just feels like we're doing a lot more homework on what prices are players going to be from the Eagles, as opposed to who are they going to be trying to bring in from the outside, where that, even for them right now, that's got to be a very nebulous concept until they get some stuff done. That's exactly where I was going to go here. So it depends on what the market bears for these players who are up, the UFAs. The Eagles have 17 of them. Mm-hmm. And then who of the guys they're the least initially trying to get back, where they think they can get them back. I don't want to say easily, but they have a better chance on the early portion of free agency to get back. It's just there are a lot of variables, and there's some guys who might get a big money market out there for themselves, like Bradbury and others, where they just simply may not be able to compete because he's older, he's did a great job, but you have to be careful of how much you pay guys who are older. The Eagles have done a good job, relatively good job, other than Jeffrey, when that last deal he did. Other than that, they've done a pretty good job of making great decisions on who they keep and who they let go. But you're right, this is a very challenging situation for them, which they're usually not in. They've never had this kind of number of free agents that I could remember. I can't remember any team having this number of free agents before. 20 is a lot. Yeah. In fact, they actually started with 19, and then they cut Brett Toth. Right. It was weird. We see this. 2 or 3 guys get cut, though their contract's up in March. It's just weird. I don't know why they did it. I was told there's no. I didn't even put 2 and 2 together on that one. I forgot his contract was up. Yeah, there's no cap. Well, okay, technically, I think he was on the cap for not whatever I don't know how much money they could possibly save. Right. Unless he had some incentive. In fact, he didn't even play because he was on PUP. So I don't think they're saving anything. So no, this is not a cap casualty situation. Yeah, I don't know why they did that. In fact, the Panthers, there's another thing. I noticed all the stuff. The Panthers cut 3 players. 2 are on the reserve retired list, and 1 was on the reserve did not report list. I was told there was no cap gain on these lists, on these players being released. They're just clearing off their list of retired players. Wow, crazy. That's kind of funny. I digress. Yeah, so we'll get into that. I really want people to check out your free agent rankings. I think they're great. They're on the website, insidethebirds.com, divided into offense and defense, especially as everything starts today, really at noon, right, is when the legal tampering period begins. So at about 12:02, you'll probably hear of the first major signing that goes on, even though technically it's not official until Wednesday. And we're going to put this disclaimer out, because we know how attached everybody gets to free agency, but we can't proceed without our warning. And this has really been something we tried to do each year for the last 3 or 4 years. Careful, because guys back out more so now than ever before. We all joke about former Eagle Frank Gore. That's like a long time ago, but every year it seems to be a significant name, right, that you think agreed to terms with somebody, and they did agree. But then they disagreed a day later because somebody had better terms. So Darius Smith backed out with a deal last year, who's now with Minnesota. Yep. He agreed. Now, he did it in what the league calls this. They don't call it the legal tampering period. The media, like you and I do and the fans do, they call it the open negotiating period, where the only players that can negotiate with other teams are guys who don't have agents, like Lamar Jackson. He can negotiate his franchise tag deal if he ever gets one. Bobby Wagner did his with the Rams last season. Did pretty good, by the way. Got a nice 1 year nugget there of money. But yeah, so in Gore in 2015, Schefter and I reported that people close to him said that he was going to sign with the Rams, the Eagles. And as you said, former Eagle legend, he backed out. Now, to this day, some people speculated he maybe got some intel on Chip Kelly. I don't remember. This is now 8 years ago. So you're right. And I remember Sam Adams. This is how far I go back. I think it was Sam Adams. I know it was a D tackle with the Ravens. I'm pretty certain it was Sam Adams. He was with Seattle and Baltimore. I think he might have backed out with a deal with somebody.
Yep.
Or just
Anthony Barr did it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, Anthony Barr. That was a huge one. Oh my God. The Vikings almost passed out when he changed his mind with the Jets. It's a great one you brought up. They were so happy to get him back. I remember talking to them. They were like, and they were heartbroken that they thought they had him, and he agreed to a deal with the Jets, and he changed his mind. And then J.D. McKissick agreed with a deal with the Bills.
That's right. That was last year. Yeah.
Yep. So you're right. Great point, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. Now, we reported this back last March that the Eagles made a fairly significant offer to Allen Robinson. At one point, they thought they were going to get him, and then, thankfully for them, he went to the Rams.
Yeah, no, absolutely, thankfully, right? And yeah, that's another one. Allen Robinson. Yeah, we were, last few years, it's just been a little bit more, it's just been different to try to figure out free. This is certainly the weirdest year of free agency for the Eagles that there's ever been. And then you brought up an interesting point too that factors in with age and not being afraid. Guys get older, and there's a fine line between how much you can give someone older. And the Eagles have a couple of guys like Bradbury and I want to say Sayamalu, who's not that old, but really it would be Bradbury and Javon Hargrave, who are at that age where you wonder if you're really going to want to commit a lot of money, and you wonder how the league values their age as well. So a lot to talk about as we get deeper into the podcast. We had a really good time going through what free agency is like from a preparation standpoint with Rick Spielman. He was fantastic, the former Vikings GM, former Dolphins GM, had a really excellent story that just shows you how much has changed from salary standpoint about when he was with Miami and they were trying to figure out were they going to pay Jason Taylor or not. And when you hear the money, right, that they were kind of sort of reluctant over, even Spielman at one point goes, it's like ridiculous now to even think that was even
when I saw his face, he seemed to be almost exasperated because back then it was almost unheard of to the kind of signing bonus they gave Jason Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of probably shocked him back then, but he's would be a Hall of Famer. You got to do it. So you're right. This is a very unique free agency, and Rick also talked about one of the potential Eagles free agent targets.
He did.
So we talked to Rick about that, and he just we had not, in the history of our 5 years of our show, it's the only thing we haven't talked about with these former GMs is how does free agency work, the system, the meetings, cap, cash from the team president or the controller, ownership. He talked about how he had to fly to New York to see the Wilfs, present his game plan and how that works, and it was a whirlwind for 45 minutes. It was absolutely awesome.
It makes you realize how much a general manager, how important a GM is, but without a staff, right? Without directors of pro and player personnel, and then a cap person, it's almost impossible to figure out how you can do it because, as Rick walked us through, almost every, I assume every team does this. Maybe some teams fall short, but there's over 200 free agents every year. You only know about the top 20% because you hear their names, right? But as a listener, as a viewer, you guys there's probably 80% of the free agent class you didn't realize was a free agent because they're just not household names. But each team has a scouting report on each of those guys. They've been scouted, then you got to pull them up, and you have to do your homework on almost each and every single one of your guys. So that involves your pro staff. It also involves your college staff because some of these guys might just be a few years in. And Rick said you go back to their college scouting reports and you have to pull all that together. Then you have to evaluate them and have guys watch tape on them. And then you have to evaluate them with your salary guy, like how much is it? This guy's a good player. How much is that going to be worth? This guy's a medium level player. How much is he going to be worth? There's so many cooks that go into this broth. And really, from the end of the season to start of free agency, the combines in between, it's not like you have all the time in the world. So Rick was talking about daily meetings with everybody and just taking all the information. And then like, you're the guy, right? You're the GM. So you now have to whittle this information down and figure out how you're going to make it work. And you do this year after year after year. I asked him as a joke, do you miss that? He's like, no, I kind of like this media thing now. It's a lot less work and the money's pretty good there. So I can understand if you just get like after 10 or 15 years of it, like he had been in the game for that longer. It's got to be like major stress relief not to have to worry about that.
When I've talked to Rick, he said he just feels so much better. And most personal guys say that, particularly GMs, but then they get the itch.
Mm-hmm.
I know he had the opportunity to go with Jacksonville last year and decided not to do it. But look, the bottom line is the Eagles have had, for the most part, done a phenomenal job under Roseman for free agency, particularly in recent years. We know how bad it was in 2011, but that was a long time ago. How he's learned from his mistakes for the most part. And he is, from talking to personnel people, a lot of people think if he's not the best at it, he's certainly one of the best. And I got to give him credit. Last year was a virtuoso performance. He just timed it out well. The Reddick contract was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, obviously he was I don't want to say way better, but he was better than anticipated.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair.
3 years, 45, I mean, only $15 million a year.
His contract looks like a steal right now.
Ready for this one? Without looking, what do you think TJ Watt gets? And he's a great player, but what do you think and he's obviously a high-end pass rusher.
I thought he was up around 23 or 24 million a year, right?
Well, Reddick got 15 million a year, which was very fair, and obviously he looked great. 28.15 million a year. 28.15.
Oh my Lord.
Is he 13 million a year better? Watt and
wow.
Reddick, I get they're still different, but
parents, have your kids come up and be pass rushers. That's all I gotta say.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Anyway.
Well, if you want to catch the entire Rick Spielman interview, as many of our Patreon, all of our Patreon subscribers did, just head to patreon.com/InsideTheBirds, sign up, become a subscriber. There's a lot of perks, including Adam's Wednesday night chat, which have been getting real crowded. That room's getting a lot of questions as we get closer to free agency. You've been doing a great job answering all those questions and chatting with the people.
Smart guys.
Yeah, definitely. That's 8:00 every Wednesday. And then, of course, we'll do our Ask ITB live stream pretty soon, probably this week. Just wanted to get a couple of days into free agency to see how things rounded out so we could answer some questions.
With our luck, something will, like if we do it Thursday, someone will sign or be a trade. It would actually be cool. Have we ever had anything in these or like when you've done the show, like live, something happened big with Eagles? Doing live shows or anything?
I think during one of our pregame shows, we got tipped off on something, ITB pregame live.
Okay.
On a Sunday, and we were able to report it. It was 2 years. I think we were back when we were at Goose Island.
Okay.
It was either you or me. Somebody got something, and we were able to go right away with
just literally live.
Yeah, like while we were on. So that was fun.
Cool.
That was fun. All right, let's talk about the team here, because there were a couple of moves and things that happened this week. Obviously, the biggest headline of the week, and it was really not someone who we had been talking about a whole lot lately because he's not a free agent, but there was a report came out that from Diane Orsini of ESPN that Darius Slay's agent was given permission to seek a trade. Now, Darius Slay went on a podcast. Is it his podcast? It's his own podcast, and said he didn't ask to be traded. So they were given permission to seek a trade, but he didn't ask to be traded. He is in the final year of his deal. It's a $17 million salary that is not guaranteed, but he does have voided years left on his salary. So I know some people like, I'm in the last year, it's not guaranteed, you're going to cut me. I don't think he's worried about getting cut. What he wants, as we understand, he just wants a new deal. He wants more money. He feels like he's worth more than $17 million a year. And this is going to bring out a really interesting discussion, because as soon as an athlete starts to ask for more money, he often is judged on his latest and most recent performance. So I listened closely to what I heard people saying on sports radio and on the comments. And it's very funny how a team that has not had a very good cornerback, multi-year Pro Bowl cornerback in like 2 decades,
Yeah.
the fans are just like, ah, well, he wasn't that good in the Super Bowl or the second half. So the guy makes a point about his salary compared to some of the top
Okay,
corners and
yeah.
where he is in the pecking order.
I like what he said on his podcast. He was actually very. I only read the word. I read the transcript that's out there from David Zangaro from is it NBC Sports Philly, as we always
Yes.
called CSN. But anyway, so basically, he's like, look, he gets where the Eagles are with this. He knows where he is. He's not making a big deal out of it. Now the question would be, if they don't move him, is he going to be okay playing at $17 million for this season? Because we've looked into it. There's been no movement to do an extension. We've not. Now I know a lot of people think he's going to get it. Is going to get restructured. Here's the problem with that: the previous 2 years he got restructured. 2021 and 2022, they converted nearly just under 27 million over those 2 seasons for cap purposes. Here, and because of that, his cap number went up to 26 million, just over 26 million this season. Even if he's off the team, even if he's traded this year, he'll still count just under 14 million for 2024, because that's part of the voidable years. It's got 3 voidable years: 24, 25, and 26, i.e., dummy years.
Yep.
I mean, you could restructure again. You could put him down in the minimum base salary if you wanted to, but the problem is you're going to jack up. You're going to jack up that cap number to probably nearly 20 million for 2024 if he's not on the roster. Are you really going to do that?
Which he's not going to be. I mean, he's not going to be on the roster in 2024. I wonder, Adam, do you have the post June 1st? Because what I could see happening here is, first of all, I don't think I can't see him holding out, because it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for a 32-year-old cornerback to hold out. I get that he's made the last 4 Pro Bowls or whatever it is, but you take a year off at that position, you get a year older at that age. I don't know. So I don't know how much leverage he has, but I don't think the Eagles also want a disgruntled player on their team. Mm-hmm. So what I could imagine happening is that if Howie drafts a couple of cornerbacks and they're really impressed with them in OTAs, and he can trade for maybe a guy who's in the 3rd year of a 4-year deal is pretty good, that maybe then they would accommodate a Slay trade coming out of training camp, sort of like what CJ Gardner-Johnson went through with the Saints. I could see that happening, because if you do that post June 1st, I mean, you still have to pay the money, but it allows you to break it up into 2 years, right?
Yeah. So what happens is the current year cap number is the current year, and then on June 2nd, you get to put the rest on next year. It's a 2-year structure with the dead money. That's how post June 1 works. You split over 2 seasons. I don't know I don't have the workup on that part of it, but the bottom line is, it's not a great situation. I totally get where Slay is. He should want a new deal. I would want a new deal. I mean, making all the Pro Bowls, as you said, but he just turned 32. You got to be careful. There are very few starting corners, 33, 34 years old. It's very rare. He's been very durable. What a great trade that was in 2020. In fact, if you recall, they tried to get him in 2019, and they couldn't agree on the compensation. They got it done the year later. So he's been a great Eagle, but they're in kind of a tough situation. This one is going to be worth watching for
sure. So, and real quick, because his agent is Drew Rosenhaus.
Yeah.
Very possibly the Eagles said, we're not going to give you more money. Again, he doesn't have much leverage unless he's willing to hold out, which I have a hard time believing. But why don't you go see if somebody's willing to give you what you're looking for in an extension? And let's say they're willing to give you $19.5 million a year. Maybe then you're supposed to make 17 with us. We can meet the difference there. 2.5, you're worth it. We value you. And maybe that makes him happy. I don't know, because that doesn't really give him much more security beyond this year. So I don't know if it's the money or the security that he's looking for. Usually it's a combination of both. But I think that's why the Eagles said, go ahead, we're going to give you permission to seek a trade, because they don't think that teams around the league are going to look at Darius and Slay and say, we want that guy for 3 years at $20 million a year at that age. I don't see that happening. Although I guess how old is Jalen Ramsey? Because he obviously Miami Dolphins just gave him a truckload of money, and he's not young, but I don't think he's as old as Slay, right?
No, he's not. He's much younger. He should be I don't even think he's 30 yet. Ramsey is
He's
he
probably like
turns 29.
20. Okay.
29 in October.
Right. So that's why, again, I think the Eagles feel like they get it, but they don't have to do anything.
Sure.
This was the same situation I think Malcolm Jenkins was in at the last 2 years of his deal. Remember, he made it known he wanted a new deal. He didn't get it. He played another year, the penultimate year of his contract, and then the next year, I think the Eagles let him go when the cap hit wasn't as exorbitant. If I remember that correctly, they released him, and then he went and signed with New Orleans. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I know it's easy to look at this and say he's as good as gone, but again, where's the leverage here on his part? Unless he's willing to hold out. Or
remember, they hold his contract rights. They'll make it's up to them. It's not up to Slay and Rosenhaus. Because let's say Rosenhaus finds a team, right? Then it's up to the Eagles to say yes or no. Because let's move this on here, okay? Before we get to the number 2 part of this show. If they do trade him, they don't have a starting outside corner under contract. McPherson is not a starting outside corner. Zach McPherson was a 4th rounder in 2021. He's an in the mix guy, can play inside or outside, special teamer. They don't know what he is yet as a corner on the outside yet. They don't know that yet. So Slay could be traded. Bradbury's contract's up. They've gotten very lucky the last years. Somehow, some way, they've gotten through with these guys not getting hurt. Good for them, but they rolled dice and they rolled double sixes in terms of injury. Now they've got I don't want to say a crisis, but they got an issue right now. It's not just Slay; it's Bradbury being up.
Right.
They haven't addressed the position. I get they have 2 first-round picks, 10 and 31, right?
10 and 30.
And 30. Okay. Oh, that's right. Dolphins are. That's right. The Dolphins lost that pick. So they've got a situation now where they just don't have those corners, and you really also want to get younger. So, I mean, you hate to say they're boxed into drafting a corner at 10, or if they trade down, but one way or the other, they've got to get younger corner. There's really no choice anymore.
Right. Now, if some teams willing to give the Eagles a third for Slay and then willing to give him a contract, I think Howie might do that even without his corners all settled right now, because he has no picks between rounds. He has no 4th, 5th, and 6th round pick, if I'm not mistaken, right? And we know Howie wants more picks. So at that point, that's sort of like an offer that sounds pretty good, I would think. But I don't know that that's going to happen. So if anything does, I still think it would be more likely to happen later down the road. So, late spring, summer, coming out of camp. We'll see.
I mean, there are very few starting corners over 30. I'm not saying at 30. I'm talking about over 30. Slay's one of the oldest starting corners in the NFL. He just turned 32, but it's just, and in fact, we asked Rick Spielman this about, I forget which position, because he talked to, we asked him about, did you do studies? And he goes, absolutely, they do. They did studies on per position. They have the analytic data of what's the age where these guys, he'd say fall off a cliff. You know what I mean? You know what we mean here. When they either the body breaks down or they're just not the same player. And you got it. It's why you don't see a lot of safeties or corners in their 30s. Malcolm Jenkins bucked that trend. Obviously, he was tremendous in his 30s, but you don't see a lot of them doing it.
Yeah. And, again, outside, I know that people are down on him from the Super Bowl in the second half. Greg Cosell has said his tape isn't that bad. There are a couple of plays that stand out, but people are a little bit too down on him. But outside of Sauce Gardner, Patrick Surtain, Jair Alexander, I don't know if there's anybody playing at a higher level. There are a couple of cornerbacks who are playing at a pretty good level, that like a Tariq Woolen played well. Trayvon Diggs plays well, but I don't know if they're playing better than Slay, because there's a pretty big drop off once you get after the top 5 or 6. So be careful when you're like, we don't need him. He didn't have a great second. He's a good corner.
Where you get and this is okay on that. Where are you getting a great corner? I mean, it's just
there you go.
Who makes them available?
Time, right?
Yeah, look, they got it. They have to address it. I mean, they don't have a choice this year. They've got to address this position.
There you go. All right. We've said that about other positions before, though, and that's that. So I never. No, they have to.
Safety. I know you've been on the safety thing, but look, they've gotten away with it because what happens is sometimes they just don't go with their own guys. They go, okay, we'll address it, but we'll go with another team's
right.
Johnson.
Right. So. All right. So a player did resign who was going to be a free agent. And that was good news for the Eagles. And Tim McManus, our buddy at ESPN.com, had the story that Brandon Graham will be back for one more season. The contract is up to $6 million. So it's not even $6 million. I think, that's, listen, Brandon wanted to be an Eagle. This part doesn't surprise me. I never really bought into the whole Cleveland thing just because I couldn't see Brandon going off to play for the Browns, leaving the Eagles. And the Eagles did the right thing too. I mean, it's not chump change. He's not a starter, but he's paying $6 million. It's good for a rotational defensive end. He probably could have done a little better on the open market, but you know what? He's an Eagle through and through. And I think, listen, this makes sense for both, and it's really good to see. What do you want? He planned on playing a pretty decent number of snaps last year.
43% of the defensive snaps, plus specials. By the way, he did play on special teams, coming off a torn Achilles.
Yeah,
that's amazing. And I love the role that they have. They knew this is the smartest thing for all concerned. Have him be a sub package rusher, still could play inside. He just was tremendous in that role. And typically when it's up to, it means it's usually between 50 to 75% of the total number. So it's $6 million, right? It's probably between 4 and 5 million base or cash, and the rest is incentive. So it's again up to $6 million. So yeah, that's a great. I'm so glad he's back. And your Brandon, I remember talking to him last summer. He's going to settle down here. Sounds like in the Philly area. So this is great.
Yeah, hard to. I have a hard time thinking he's not going to be in the Philadelphia media when it's all said and done. So because he's just a natural, he got great charisma. He can break down the game. Might even be with Inside the Birds if we can finagle that. So that would be cool. I'm not reporting anything, people. I'm just, I like Brandon. We talk every once in a while. So if we can make that happen, he might be too big though. No, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Good for him. And look, this is one of the reasons why I'm not. I think we're both like this. We're not as doom and gloom about the state of the Eagles defense, even if they lose everybody, because we know this game is one of the trenches. And no matter what happens, they got Josh Sweat, they got Hassan Reddick, they got Brandon Graham. That's three good. I mean, you're gonna have a hard time finding a team out there with a better trio of pass rushers. You know they're gonna draft somebody on the inside. We'll see what Jordan Davis. We'll see what happens with him. So they're always going to be strong up front. That's what they prioritize. Doesn't mean doesn't mean they're going to have as good of a defense as they had last year, but I don't think you have to. But I think they will be okay. That's just how I feel about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Speaking of defense, Adam, the Eagles have a new linebackers coach, a guy who's been coaching for quite a while, just not in the NFL. He's got a lot of experience in the college ranks. His name is DJ Elliott, and his latest stop was defensive coordinator of your alma mater, Adam Caplan, the
Temple Owls, man. How about this one? He gets to coach in the same stadium he just coached in last year.
How about that? That is pretty interesting.
I wonder. I know that Kyron Johnson played for him at Colorado, and
no, Kansas. He was.
I'm sorry.
Right. It was Davion Taylor at Colorado that he coached.
Colorado, yeah. Gotcha. And Kyron Johnson at Kansas, so he knows two players. Maybe they recommended him. But okay, he's 46 years old. This is your senior guy in terms of he's older. They wanted an older coach. This is what they preferred, and they got that guy. But again, he's never coached the National Football League. Temple's defense last season, I could tell you, they had some bad games. They had some, like the Memphis game was so physical. Temple just did not have a lot of talented players on defense, but they couldn't score on offense. Temple, that's why they lost that game. But their defense was super physical. I like the way he coached. He just didn't have enough talent. It's not the first time they've done this, bringing guys out of college. Now, I would warn you, sometimes it doesn't work. Gunter Brewer did not work at all. Trying to be kind here.
Yeah, Chip also brought in a bunch of guys from college that only had college, like John Lovett and somebody else. One of his wide receivers coaches too was pretty collegey compared to NFL, and it just didn't work out so well. Right.
So anyway, to move this along here, Elliott's he's coached linebackers throughout his career. He's also been in DC a couple times. So he's got a lot of experience. He's 46 years old. There's got to be some connection here, but the bottom line is he's coached linebackers. They did not really want to go someone younger, and that's kind of where it's at. And remember now, these coaches generally on 2-year deals.
Right. They are on 2-year deals. So I'm glad you brought that up. So we've sort of teased toward this a couple of pods ago, and we just like to be firm with our information, and this one's a little bit tougher than others. But as we know, most coaches are on 2-year deals, right? Unless you're like a coordinator, because I think you reported Desai got 3 because he's,
Yes.
got some clout to him. What we've tried to do since the end of the year, because this was just the end of Nick Sirianni and his regime's second year, is find out, did everybody re-up their contract? And we have not, unless you have any, I have not been able to confirm that everybody has been re-upped. I also don't know that they haven't. I just usually can get a yes or a no on things of that nature. And because I haven't gotten that yet, and I don't think you have either, unless you've got different information, it just makes me wonder if there's still some fluidity going on. I mean, we know the Eagles need a secondary coach, defensive backs coach / pass game coordinator. We know that there are some teams. I think there are still some teams trying to finalize their staffs around the NFL. Has Gannon finalized his entire staff?
Yeah, he did. I think
he did. Okay.
Oh, and also they need a defensive quality control coach. So they need 2 coaches. This is
right.
The games aren't played until September, but it's really hard unless you go to college. It's really hard to get, because they can basically these guys could be blocked. Like if you're looking for a DB's coach from another team, they can be blocked because it's not for a coordinator job. So it's not going to be easy.
Right. I mean, we obviously know that Jeff Stoutland got an extension. We know that obviously the linebackers coach just came on, so he's most likely under a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
So I just don't know about like guys like Aaron Moorhead and Rocker and some Singleton and any of those guys. So, I mean, a lot of these positions did well. So I don't have any reason to doubt anything. I just, haven't gotten any concrete information on that. So,
because they haven't announced the staff yet. Yeah,
exactly.
Just kind of weird. Yeah, I get, but they typically don't announce the staff until it's finished. So it's important to note that. So we'll see how Elliott does. By the way, his last name, no 2 T's, only 1.
Oh man, we can't have 2 Elliots with 1 T in this city between him and Shore Parks. That's crazy.
Well, but Jake Elliott has 2 T's, who also got his contract restructured.
He does have 2 T's, just like Jumbo Elliott did. All right.
Jim Jumbo. Yeah.
Jim Jumbo Elliott. All right. We got a lot on free agency. We're going to go through it all. Offense, defense. First, we're going to pause real quick to hear a word from our great sponsors. All right. Let's start off, and we'll run through as much as we got. We'll try to empty the notebook here. Again, this is just one of the weirdest off seasons that there's been, free agent tampering periods. So let's start at quarterback, Adam. Gardner Minshew is a guy who's gonna hit the free agent market. Are you getting any sense of whether there are certain teams that you think are like, we want Gardner Minshew? Because you've mentioned it's going to be a deep quarterback market.
Yeah, well, it's deep for backups. They're like
that's what I meant. Deep backup quarterback market.
Yeah, Minshew is one of the best. He's looking to compete for a starting job. So the Eagles have not completely closed the door. It's kind of what happened. If he can't find what he wants, the Eagles haven't signed a backup. They were talking about it, but so he's looking to compete. There are a lot of there's like the Bucks. I had heard the combine where one of the names they're looking at is Baker Mayfield. I think NFL Network had the same report. Maybe Houston, or who knows for Minshew. There's got to be some team that will let him at least come in to compete. But here's the problem: even if it's Houston, I don't know that it's Houston yet, but I'm just bringing up kind of teams that are open. Even if it would be Houston, they're drafting a quarterback at 2. So how much would he really compete for that job?
Right.
So that's the challenge for him. It may look good now, but it may not look good after the draft. So that their Eagles are in fine shape. They could find a backup quarterback. I mean, there's so many of them out there. There's some decent ones out there too.
Right. I think the one thing that probably might not be in his favor is sort of the lack of like the guy who drafted him. The executive Dave Caldwell is with the Eagles right now, so that's why he's here. But the coach who drafted him was Marone, if I'm not mistaken.
Right? No, it was Dave Caldwell's call. He was
no. I know, but I'm saying like his first coach was Doug Marone, correct?
Yes, correct. Yes,
and Doug's not with another NFL team right now, correct?
He's with New Orleans, I think, is their O-line coach.
Is he? I thought he went to college.
He was. He left Alabama.
Oh man, I can't keep up with Doug Marone. He's everywhere. All right, New Orleans, but does New Orleans they're sort of trying to keep Winston as a backup, right?
Yeah, which is weird.
I don't get
that
weirdest thing ever.
That I get why Dalton may not want to come back because he's another guy based on the state of quarterback. He probably has a chance to compete somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm not down that report that's out there about Winston may come back. But remember, this is the team after he got hurt would not even let him compete. Like okay, they wouldn't even let him play again
Right.
after he got healthy. It's
crazy.
and with all the money they're paying, 15
and
million.
I know it's incredible. And so his first coordinator was DiFilippo, Johnny,
Yeah.
and Flip is not in the NFL right now. We know that. So sometimes you see these connections happen where a guy goes to a team because of the familiarity, and I don't know that New Orleans and Marone being the O-line coach is going to have a whole lot of clout on getting Gardner Minshew over there.
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't know if you can go there. So yeah, I don't see that.
So on our latest, the intel with Greg Cosell, it's the final one of the series. I mean, he's going to do the draft with us, but of free agency preview, it's out. Well, it'll be out this morning sometime. If you're catching ITB here on Monday morning, like first thing, then intel is probably not up yet, but it will be at some point. And he had we all had a really interesting discussion on this running back market and how in general the position is a little bit different than, say, pass rusher, where everybody team's looking at an edge rusher, because Miles Sanders might theoretically to some be the top running back on the market now that the tag has gone to Saquon and Josh Jacobs and Pollard. But, David Montgomery from the Bears, who's a different kind of runner, Adam, this was the conversation we had, might be the apple of the eye of a team that uses the run more foundationally, whereas Miles Sanders might be better for a team that likes to, like the Eagles, run, pass, mix the run in. Yeah. Because Montgomery's more built for that pounding type of game, and Miles is more built for the finesse sort of, although he runs hard. I just mean like the team that wants to pass the ball.
I agree.
So the market's going to be interesting for these guys.
Yeah. So I know talking to some salary cap people around the league, seems like 7 million is going to be that sweet spot for the top running backs. Could it get more? Sure. If one of the backs gets a lot of leverage, I'd be very surprised if any of them see 10 million or more. I'd be surprised. I get it, Barkley, Jacobs, and Potter off the market because they got franchised, but it doesn't mean guys deserve to get paid more because Sanders, as talented as he is, teams see him as a first or second down back, not a 3-down back. Montgomery, he doesn't catch the ball poorly. He can catch it, but he's a grinding type running back. Foreman, the Panthers, he's got interest out there. He wants he wants a lot of money. He wants pretty good coin. I've heard at least 5 million, if not more, per season. He'd be a great
guy who started off as the third running back on the Panthers last year.
And after he put up really good numbers after McCaffrey was traded.
He did.
Yeah. So then it's a bunch of marginal starters. Like Damian Harris is a good player, but he more or less lost his job to Stevenson. Singletary, Motors out there. That's his nickname, Motor Devin Singletary. He's an okay back. Rashad Penny's always hurt. Kareem Hunt, who the Eagles had interest in at the trade deadline, as we reported. He's out there. A guy that to keep an eye on is Alexander Madison. It's a guy that we've heard Eagles have some interest in. We'll see what happens. But getting back to Sanders, I'm very interested to see if he signs elsewhere what he gets. If he gets 7 million, if he gets an offer 7 million, I would take it. If I'm Miles with his agent Eddie Edwards, I would take that.
My God, yeah.
I'd be stunned if he gets more than that because it's hard to justify when the guy's a first and second down back, has an injury history. It is what it is, but a good football player, very productive when healthy. And he had a great year, but he also has had an injury history. So we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, of all the markets that I'm fascinated by, this would be the number one because it would not shock me if both extremes, if there was a good market for Miles because he's one of the top running backs on the market and maybe the top based on how teams are looking at them. But it also wouldn't shock me at all if there just was not money for running backs in free agency. And Miles didn't get couldn't even get 5 or 6.
I was talking. Yep. Oh boy. I was talking to team.
That's a little low, I know, because Connor made what 7.
Yeah, 6 or 7 million. I was talking to team about Foreman. They liked him, and they obviously Carolina would know him better because they had him. But this team was telling me he's we're not paying him 6 or 7 million.
Yeah,
and the team said they're not even sure if he's worth 5 because this guy said he goes, I think he might be more valuable to Carolina than us because if he wants, because again he's never been a full-time starter we're talking about a whole season. Remember he had I think he might have had a torn Achilles very early in his career. It's maturity issues. But boy, he did a great job as the backup for Henry 2 years ago. But it's all about, it's not so much what you just did, it's about projecting. Okay, if you're going to sign him to be a starter, can he handle 15 plus carries a game and stay healthy? He's been asked to do it before, but Sanders has. But again,
Right.
he's not a 3-down back.
Right. And there's only a few teams that really use the run foundationally that would want to pay for a running back. So, the Miami Dolphins do. They don't really have a number one running back. Jeff Wilson's always hurt, and I don't know. So if it's not going to be a team like that, a Shanahan style team, I don't know where that money's going to come from. The Steelers are an interesting team. They don't normally go after big free agents, but it hasn't really, Najee Harris he averaged like 3.8 yards per carry last year. So they may look for sort of a tandem, like a good 1A to go with Najee, somebody who runs a little bit better, and maybe Miles is that guy, and he's from Pittsburgh. But again, the Steelers don't typically spend a lot in free agency, and certainly not at that position.
Yep.
So
Yep.
It's worth noting, because Boston Scott's a free agent, that he didn't re-sign with the Eagles until about 10 days into free agency last year, maybe a little longer than that.
March 24th was when he re-signed. Zach Pascal signed on March 20th. So the Eagles did some good jobs on bargain hunting. Although I'll tell you, Scott got paid a lot. He got just under $2 million to be a third string running back. That was a little high, but it's kind of weird because it's almost hard to argue with his production. Of course, as long as he plays the Giants, but we digress.
Of course. So it's funny because we talk about the offensive line, Adam, and we've talked a lot about Isaac Seumalo, who we expect to get a very big deal on the free agent market and very likely be, somewhere else. But we really haven't spent time talking about some other free agents who are, just because it's first of all, we'll start with Jason Kelce. He actually is a free agent. I think people forget that. It's funny because I look at the free agent rankings on certain websites just to see where they have it. And even on yours, I don't think you have Jason Kelce ranked. Did you? As a free agent? I have to go back and look now, because it's almost like the national media or the media isn't treating him like his.
No one's talking about it. I know. Yeah. Shame on me for not having him up there. I'll make sure I put him up. Well, okay, here's the latest as of Monday morning. It'd be a minor surprise if he doesn't come back. It's just a gut feeling based on what we've heard the last couple of weeks. He hasn't made a decision yet, to be clear. So it'd be fascinating if he doesn't come back. What would happen if Isaac Seumalo also signs elsewhere? Because then you've got a lot of change on the interior.
Yeah.
Because then you would have Juergens as the starting center. What would they do at right guard?
Yeah. Well, they'll probably draft 5 offensive linemen. So that's what they do.
To get a lot more picks. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they will. And then Andre Dillard, that he's a sort of a wild card. We haven't talked about him at all. He's got no place on the Eagles. He's about to walk into free agency as a guy who plays a premier position and yet has probably played like 5 games over the last 2 years or something, 3 years, but yet still might secure a pretty big bag because of the position he plays and who he is.
Well, he did take some snaps at guard, so maybe that helps him. Did he ever take any snaps? Oh, he did years ago at right tackle, and I know he didn't enjoy that.
Yeah, that did not go well.
But maybe that helps him. Look, he's a relatively young left tackle, doesn't have a lot of tread. I know he's had some injuries, but he does turn 28. That's not super old. Turns 28 in October. It's not like left tackles make it to market. Maybe he gets a decent deal and helps their compensatory number.
We will see. I'm trying to go through and think who's the likeliest offensive free agent to stay, and it might be Boston Scott.
That's an easy one. They can wait till
Wouldn't it be funny if they did it like if it got announced like among the first wave of free agents, like all these guys making $1 billion, and all of a sudden, report Boston Scott re-signs on a 1 year.
I love it that it happens with clubs like all right among the euphoria, right? And the guy, they crowbar that in, right?
Yeah,
right. So that's it. Yeah, nothing. Honestly, their offense is going to be really good. I'll say this in March. I think their offense is going to be fantastic. I really do. With the big three pass targets: Goddard, Brown, and Smith. We'll see on Sanders. I don't worry about that with Gainwell, Sermon. If they don't get Sanders back, they'll find a running back either cheap or get one in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
They got their tackles: Johnson and Mailata, Dickerson. they never go in with a bad offensive or defensive line. They just don't do that. So I don't worry about the offense. Defensively, we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we're going to get into the defense in a second. First, we're going to remind you about our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation. And let's hear a word from our other great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you hop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam just sent you. You will get a great deal. And before we get into defensive free agents, I do want to remind everybody, if you got Phillies fever, like we all do, check out my podcast with Frank Close, Phillies insider Frank Close. It's called Powder Blue Podcast. We're talking Phils, and it's been an exciting time and a little bit of a, what would you call it, Adam? A little bit of a discouraging news on Andrew Painter, obviously, that he won't be able to pitch because of the elbow for a little while. And then the WBC sort of takes, I think it's kind of interesting because A, I've been watching WBC games, but B, it gives guys like Scott Kingery a chance to go play and get some playing time out there while Trey Turner and Schwarbs are gone. And by the way, did you see the bomb that Schwarber hit against Great Britain?
No.
Oh my God.
I don't follow that WBC.
Oh, you gotta come on. You gotta. It's
after hearing Francesa.
Lifers.
I'm sorry.
It's for the true baseball life.
Oh, because when Mike Francesa said he wouldn't even watch it if it was his backyard, it makes me laugh. You know that clip.
I wouldn't watch that if it was played on my street.
In my backyard, he said.
In my backyard.
Right. But did he a short bomb? Did he?
Yeah.
But look, it. And Brock Purdy, by the way, he had the surgery. It's the shorter version, which will keep him out 6 months. He can throw in 3 to 4 months. But with a pitcher and Painter, who's is he the number one pitching prospect in baseball?
He is.
Okay, but you worry about it's a UCL. It's his right elbow. Worry about that. It's a sprain, which means i.e. a tear, some sort of a tear. But got to let it heal. I know Dr. David Chow, he commented on that on Twitter, and Doc, he worries about the long term. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, he does, and we'll see. And now, luckily, this is a 5th starter we're talking about, even though we're excited about him, not like the number 1 starter, but sure. it would have been nice. All right, let's get back to the Eagles. We'll talk about some other guys who stand to make some money. Now, Javon Hargrave, Adam, man. Javon Hargrave's been an interesting kind of study for us. The vibe I got was that the Eagles would like him to be able to come back, but they also are very understanding of what the market was going to be, and that's even before what happened on Sunday, which is Daron Payne just got like $22 million a year with his extension, and then right after that, somebody else got one, right? Wasn't there another extension that came right after that for a defensive tackle?
I didn't see, but
maybe not. But either way, 22 million a year for Payne. I mean,
it's much younger.
Yeah,
much younger.
He is much younger. That's where maybe things. Again, that's where we have to kind of explore how this market is going to operate. It's finicky. It's hard to predict each year, but you'd still have to think an interior pass rusher who can get you 10 or 11 sacks a year, like Javon Hargrave, is in line to get at least 18 to 20 now.
Well, the guys that are out there, there's just no pass rushing D tackles other than Jaron Reed, who's a 3rd tackle or a little bit older. He's around the age of Hargrave, but he's a journeyman. He's been with a lot of teams. Dalvin Thompson's, I know the Vikings running back. He's really good, but he's a run stopper only. Puna Ford, as Cosell tells us on their show last week, didn't have a great year. Onyemata is an okay pass rusher, but he's more of a run stopping guy. There's just Fletcher Cox is obviously well into his 30s. There's just nobody out there. That's why he should get a monster deal. Rosenau should be able to get him. When I look at the numbers, it's insane. Jonathan, so this is unheard of. They're paying their the Commandos are paying their 2 defensive tackles $40 million, $18.17 million for APY for Jonathan Allen, and now paying $22 million a year. Are you serious for 2 D tackles?
Well, I mean, I don't know what you would if you combined Fletcher Cox's salary with Javon Hargrave's 2 years ago or 3 when they first. I'm sure that was probably at the time right up there because 3 years ago Cox's cap number was like ridiculously insane, right?
But the cap's about cash.
Okay, I mean, I'm sorry, I meant the cash number. 3 years ago, his base salary was enormous, right? Because then they wound up doing another restructure to lower it.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing it will be $40 million to 2 D tackles, but okay.
Well, of course not, because it was 3 or 4 years ago. But I'm saying it was probably the number one number at that year at that time.
Yeah. So the reason why I bring up these guys, Chris Jones, 4 years, $20 million a year. Buckner, who's a phenomenal football player, could play DN and D tackle, 4 years, $1 million a year. Grady Jarrett, 3 years, just under $17 million a year. Now these guys are all younger than Hargrave, and they're a little bit more versatile. Jones has played DN before. Buckner does both. Jarrett is an inside player, but he's super explosive. Allen could play both. They're younger, but again, it's 18 million, 20 million, 21 million, just under 17 million. I have a hard time believing Hargrave won't get a minimum of 15 million a year. He's the only pass rusher out.
Right. So, again, there's want and then there's ability to do. And I think that in this case, the Eagles may want to have him back, one of the two, if not him. But that's a huge number. And I don't know that they're going to be able to do that. They can do anything they want to do, but they do have to be realistic about things. So
he just turned 30, Hargrave. Yeah. So, but again, let's move this forward. If they walk away from Fletcher Cox and Hargrave, Cox does turn 33 in December, you're looking at a skeleton crew here because yes, the expectation is that Davis is a starter, whatever that means. Is at 40% play times at 70? We don't know yet. Got to see what kind of shape he's in. Milton Williams, they love in that third tackle role. They need a big time player opposite Davis, at least for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if Davis isn't physically ready to handle 60% of the snaps, they just have to have depth. They need a rotation. And for years, they've had a rotation. Tui Pelotu can't be counted on.
Yeah, they need starters. I mean, not just depth. Right? I mean, they need 2 guys who can play next to Davis. Yeah.
To move that on. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So they need depth. So I get it. We're only in March now. They've got the draft and they got free agency, but they've got a lot of work to do on this D line.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if the Eagles lose Hargrave and Cox, that they're not lining up in the season opener with Jordan Davis, Marlon Tuipulotu, and Milton Williams as their 3 linemen in their 5-1 or 5-2 formation. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that's not going to be their front.
And Tuipulotu, he had a pretty significant injury. Didn't he have a knee?
That's what was that? It was he was on IR, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it was. We have to find out. I don't think he had surgery though.
I don't remember. This is back in November. But anyway, so we'll move on to linebacker in a second here. But that's the challenge. Sue and Joseph obviously could sign whatever if they want to bring anything back. They can wait.
Right.
But it's figuring out a way to get either Hargrave or Cox back. Obviously, we don't expect both back. But is there a way they can get one back? So it's hard. And now, by the way, Cox had his contract redone. If you remember, they did the quick cut when they cut him and then re-signed him within 24 hours. And this was on March 31st of last year.
Interesting. All right, let's get to the next level. We got TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. Edwards, as we've been reporting, will have a market. There are going to be teams that are interested in him. And we'll just have to say, this is another one where the intel we have is that the Eagles would like to be able to have him back. But the question is, are they going to be able to bring him in at the number that he's going to wind up commanding from other teams?
Teams to watch in a second, but he's a guy that I know people knock his coverage late in the season. That's fine. But this guy has been an incredible story of development. Particularly when Schwartz left, it looked like it was questionable whether he'd be a starter at all. In the last 2 seasons, he's been fantastic. He's just so instinctive, run stopper. He gets the most out of his body. He's been better in coverage than he used to be. Certainly not great. The Eagles historically don't play their linebackers. They did with Kendricks, but Roseman didn't do that deal. Ed Manowitz did it with Chip Kelly in 2015. They brought in Bradham from Buffalo, paid him decent coin. It wasn't huge coin, but again, historically, they haven't done it in years. We'll see what happens, but we know TJ likes it in Philly, but there'll be some teams on him, and it would surprise me if one not too far away.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to make sure I phrase this correctly. Okay. There are some people I've spoke to who have identified some teams that they think would be interested in Edwards based on that team's situation and their knowledge of how that team operates. So make of that what you will. But two teams that definitely need linebacker help are the Steelers, because Devin Bush has not worked out for them, and the Bills, because I'm pretty sure they're going to lose. Well, they have not extended Terrell Edmonds.
Right, if they lose Evans, right.
Right, if they lose Edmonds, yeah.
They just extended Matt Milano for 2 more years.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have anyone who could replace Edmonds, so that would make some sense. And then
right.
You go to Pittsburgh, where Andy Weidel is there, so Andy would know.
Right.
And yeah, so Devin Bush is up. He's been a disappointment. Miles Jack is okay. He never lived up to the hype. Robert Spillane, who's been a good third inside linebacker, his contract's up, so that would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other? Are there any other teams?
Well, we know that I think we mentioned this in one pod that Gannon loves his guys, right? And so Arizona is a team that's interested in the Giants. The Giants are really hurting at linebacker.
Oh, inside. So
So
here's the story, as I understand it. So they brought back Jared Davis on a 1-year deal. He's a good blitzer. He's not the biggest guy, but he's got really good short area speed. They don't have another starting inside linebacker. Landon Collins was, they brought him in. They tried him at linebacker. He's just a backup. And Jalen Smith had to play because they had nobody else. That's a team to watch. I would be watching the Giants because they have to do something at inside linebacker. Jared Davis we'll see how many snaps he plays for them. But they have Micah McFadden, who started, then he was on the bench.
Right.
But the kid, if you're a Giants fan listening, they love this Darian Beavers, who tore his ACL last season in training camp. In fact, I'm told he was going to start. He got off to a great start and got hurt, I think, in August. But again, he had an ACL, so you don't know about him. So I like the name here for TJ Edwards because you got Brandon Brown, the assistant GM, yet again another former Eagle.
There you go. By the way, Kaiser White is a guy that probably has a chance to come back only because it's a deep linebacker market. He can be signed like 3 or 4 weeks into free agency. I don't think teams are going to be chasing after him right from the get-go. I mean, you never know. But if the Eagles do lose Edwards and Nakobe Dean steps in, they're probably going to want, if they can get Kaiser back on another 1-year deal. We'll see. I mean, he'd have a great year. He had a good start, but overall, like there's a lot of Kaiser Whites out there, like for teams. So,
but he's got good leadership.
Yeah.
Did a good job. It was a nice bargain basement deal. This is one of those bargain basement linebackers where they weren't getting it right for years, and they got this guy right. This was a really good sign. They signed him April 5th of last year for 1 year for $3 million. Did a good job for that. He definitely was worth that one. That was a really good signing.
Yeah. Yes, it was. And then, of course, Robert Quinn's going to be a free agent. He's got a lot of injuries to overcome, and he's a little long in the tooth. So it might be a little bit for him before he latches on with somebody. Let's go to the secondary. Now, James Bradbury situation, right? It's interesting. Josina Anderson put out a tweet quoting him, and Bradbury basically said what we had talked about in the last podcast, is that what we knew is that the Eagles would like to have him back again. It's the same situation, but they got to figure out what the market for him is. It's not easy because of his age, right? I mean, he's coming off a great year, but he's also a little bit older than, say, like Jamel Dean, who I think is only 25 or 26 years old, right? So we'll have to see. Now, some of the teams that we heard to watch out for, again, Arizona with Gannon, Minnesota we've been talking about for a couple pods now. We know that they want to make a splash to upgrade their secondary.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in. Minnesota. Okay, here's this is what I'm told in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
They surprisingly, I look. Obviously, they have a new GM. Rick Spielman drafted Cam Dantzler. They cut him. They didn't even. I mean, could it have been that bad? Nobody wanted him. Well, apparently so, because they waived him last Friday.
Seriously.
So here's the situation. They like Caleb Evans, who's a 4th rounder who's a tall, thin kid from Missouri. They want to take a look at him, but they don't know who will start on the opposite side. Andrew Booth was hurt last season. He just didn't contribute. In fact, he had an injury. He had some injury concerns coming out of Clemson.
Didn't Greg Cosell kind of say that Booth might sort of struggle between either outside or nickel coming out because he was a physical corner, but he lacked elite speed? I thought that was the Greg's sort of book on.
I don't remember. Maybe we'll ask Greg again when we talk to him on corners, but they don't have a starting outside corner now. Patrick Peterson's up. Their nickel corner Shannon Sullivan is up. They've had a bloodletting with the cap. They couldn't keep Thielen. They cut her, Kendricks. They have a new D coordinator. They've got some issues, and Darius Slay is acting like he wants out, though he had a good year. But they've got a lot of turmoil with the cap. So they need corners. And Bradbury, now they run a 34. It's a different. They're not running Fangio anymore. Flores runs Belichick's defense, so they're going to be a hybrid defense. We'll see if they pursue him. But that would make some sense in terms of a need. They have a major need for a veteran corner. That part of it makes absolute sense.
Yes, they do. Now, I think we've questioned sort of Bradbury in a system that blitzes a lot, like Flores likes to do, because if he has to defend deep, that's not his strength, as opposed to being in those matchup zones where he can match, carry, and deliver. But hey, we'll see. What did you know about the Raiders needing a corner? That's another team we were told to watch for.
They're bad. They're bad. They're really bad. So Rock Yassin did not work on the Ngakoue trade. Mm-hmm. Nate Hobbs is a really good inside-outside corner. He got forced to play outside last year, but he's probably better slot. Meek Robertson's a small nickel corner. Sidney Jones was there last year. He's up. They need help on the outside. And they run. Patrick Graham runs. He runs some of the Belichick system. Remember, he was with New England, and also he did a great job with the Giants, by the way. So yeah, they need a corner in the worst way. And then Jacksonville just cut Shaq Griffin. They're down a corner. So as I understand it, it's Tyson Campbell, who they like, who enters his third year, and Darius Williams, that came over from the Rams. Trey Hernan's a free agent. They don't have another corner in this league. You'd like that because teams will spread you out. So they could use another corner. Now, I don't know how much they would spend, but the Raiders, they could spend. They need to spend. The Cardinals, by the way, who you mentioned, I could obviously match, carry, deliver would be the Gannon system. Nick Rollis. Byron Murphy, who Greg Cosell talked about on our show a couple weeks ago. Greg likes, could play inside or outside. Marco Wilson's a decent corner. That's it. They just don't have enough. So that would make some sense. And there was one other team you mentioned.
What's what we talked about? Arizona, Jacksonville, Minnesota.
That's it. Yep.
Raiders. Yeah, I think that. Now I'm intrigued about what Dallas is trying to do with clearing $30 million in cap, because if you were to say, what does Dallas need the most? They need speed at wide receiver, and they need that corner opposite Diggs. That's where they got hurt big last year, right? I mean, Kelvin Joseph and Anthony Brown and who's the guy got hurt?
Jordan Lewis.
Yeah, you could. I mean, I'm not reporting any. This is no breaking news that they need a speed receiver and a corner, and they just cleared $30 million in cap.
Yeah.
So I put nothing past them. That's another defense. There's a lot of man coverage in that defense, right?
Well, yeah, you're right, because Dan Quinn, he's not running Seattle cover 3 anymore, so he's doing a lot of zone. A lot of man.
Yeah.
And look, they have enough corners, but as you just said, they benched Joseph. Jordan Lewis was hurt, and Anthony Brown's contract's up. They do have Deron Bland, who's a tall corner, and Deshaun Wright. So they have plenty of corners, but they just don't get good enough play.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
They're always the team to keep your eye on, because they're sneaky like that.
Yep.
All right, safeties. CJ Gardner-Johnson. Now, this is a fascinating one. I mean, obviously the Eagles didn't use the tag on him.
Yep.
I just don't know. I don't know if the tag was $14 million.
It was too high.
CJ Gardner-Johnson think he's getting $14+ million from somebody else.
Here's the thing on that. The more we hear about this, the Eagles aren't the other team to look at him as a hybrid player. Now, see, it's kind of like he's being penalized for being great last season.
Yeah.
Being able to do everything he was asked and then some. Because he played, as we outlined, so he played strong safety, free safety, and slot corner. I get that he missed some tackles. I mean, what you're doing with this kid is he just has this unique ability to track the football. Unlike Cosell wasn't saying he's Ed Reed. He has the instincts like Ed Reed has in terms of he just sees it before it happens. It's very unique. I don't think there's no way they knew he'd be this good. But again, they had leverage here because they look at he's a multi-position player, and there's nobody like him to pay him. Okay, there's no guy. Okay, well this guy's like Gardner Johnson, so he got paid to this. Where's the comparable to that contract? I can't find one.
Right.
So it's hard to figure that one out. But
we have not slammed the door on him coming back to the Eagles at all. That's all I'm saying.
No, this is a guy they wanted back, but I just don't know how. I don't know what the market would be for him. And then there's Epps, who the word is that he's looking to get paid as he should, and other teams have said that he's looking for a pretty good market. Now, I'm not saying he's going to Cleveland, but I find a hard time believing Jim Schwartz not going to reel in one of his guys. Epps is one of his guys.
Mm-hmm.
He really flourished. He just came on now. Marcus became a better player after Schwartz left, but he just started to show that he could be a great find. And boy, he was over the 4 years off waivers from Minnesota. So he's a guy that when you look at it, now there are a lot of safeties out there.
That's what I was going to mention, that it's a pretty deep safety market. So if you want money, and listen, he had a good year. He had a really good year. So, and he fits especially that defense. If you're playing a lot of cover one like Jim does, and you need one of your safeties come into the box and be a linebacker, that's Marcus Epps for you right there. Yeah. I mean, and he can cover a little too, but so that fit makes a lot of sense.
So now, as Cosell taught us, he liked Juan Thornhill, who's out there. Let's say if the Eagles strike out on both or one walks, who's out there? Adrian Amos is older; he's around 30. Von Bell, solid player. Donovan Wilson, I know Greg likes a lot, who's very underrated with Dallas. Now, I know the Eagles are looking at the secondary market for safeties if they can't bring them back. I know they're looking into guys like Mike Edwards and some guys who'll be cheaper. Mike Edwards, as Greg told us, could play nickel. He did it. When he was pressing the service, he had to play nickel, and he did a good job. So there are a lot of safeties out there. Nasir Adderley's out there, who never became quite the player that the Chargers were hoping for, but flashed a little bit, never consistent. And Greg also brought up Daron Harmon. Out there. There's so many safeties, as you said, man.
Now safeties though are because it's not. It's sort of like our conversation with running backs, that Miles Sanders and Montgomery are going to fit different schemes or different types of runners, and the same thing here with safeties. If you're a cover one and you want that guy to come down in and play the box, that Daron Harmon's not your guy as much, and neither is the guy from the Chiefs you just mentioned, Juan Thornhill. Yeah. Right. So the money might not be there from certain teams for those guys, but it might be for Marcus, or vice versa if you're looking for a coverage safety. So it'll be pretty interesting. But you saying Adrian Amos brought up a memory to me to let people know. The most read story on our website this week was Andrew's story on sort of bargain shopping that the Eagles can do. He listed a bunch of free agents that'll probably be available for a couple of weeks. You might even get a few of these guys after the comp pick formula stuff is over. That would be good for the Eagles. Amos was one guy on that list, and he listed about 5 guys that when you looked at it, you're like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. So I would go check that out. The title was called Bargain Shopping. So if you want to Google that and Inside the Birds, you'll find it. It was a good story by Andrew DeCecco, and we'll see. So, good for Marcus Epps if he can get that kind of deal, because what a story. Him and TJ would really be some unbelievable stories of development for the Eagles at positions that they've really struggled to develop talent at. So, unfortunately, it would also mean they couldn't keep him, but hopefully you think you might be able to, maybe you can do it again with like a Reed Blankenship, Nakobe Dean, whoever's next in.
Well, as Rick Spielman said, he made a great point. These guys get to the market, and Rick said to us that you never know. These guys get a lot of interest, but you got a lot of teams calling the agent, but then the money doesn't come home. They come back.
Right.
That's Rick said it. He didn't mention the players, but he did say it happened a lot of times over his career as a GM, where guys thought they were going to get paid because they got a lot of interest, but the offers weren't quite what they thought. So was it?
Yeah, and that was interesting because I think that answer came when I was just asking him in general about CJ Gardner-Johnson. So I don't know if that was like a natural link there or anything like that. It was interesting that's who the topic was when he wound up mentioning that. So that was a great interview. It's on our Patreon page. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in the Eagles intel. As always, we thank you. Actually, before I even end it, because tampering, there's going to be reports coming out left, right, center. Yeah. We're going to do our best on InsideTheBirds.com to have everything updated as the news comes in. And we might even do an emergency ITB if it's warranted, and who knows, it could be warranted. But we will have you. Just make sure you're following us on Twitter at InsideBirds, at Caplan NFL, at Geoff Mosher NFL on Twitter, and make sure you're going to InsideTheBirds.com for your regular updates. Our crew has been doing a great job. And then Adam's, as guys get signed, Adam's free agent rankings will change as well. So that is also going to be fluid and redone and pushed out there for everybody to see. So now that'll do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. As always, we thank you for flying with us inside the birds.